Hello, this is the Disaster Recovery Pro, and this is my video series discussing key topics in information technology with a focus on disaster recovery and business continuity. In today's presentation, we're going to take another look at ransomware attacks, but this time instead of from a technical standpoint, we're going to take a look at it from a business continuity planning standpoint and talk more about the key decision points that you're going to have to take when dealing with a ransomware attack rather than the technical response. Before we dive into this, let's take a quick look at what the definition of a ransomware attack is again. Ransomware is a type of malware attack where compromised systems and data are encrypted or locked until they're released by paying the attacker a ransom in exchange for the encryption key. The attack may render your systems unusable until they're decrypted. There may also be other less obvious consequences, such as theft and exposure of sensitive data to the public after a predetermined timeout period. And there may be other consequences as well. You just never know once somebody gets their hooks into your systems. In the end, the attacker wants to do everything they can to make sure that you pay them. So more sophisticated ransomware attacks will specifically target things like your system backups. The idea here is to prevent you from having the ability to just restore your systems from your last good backup and calling it a day. As with any disaster or disruptive event, the first phase of your business continuity response is your incident response phase. The primary goals of incident response is to ensure life safety, assess and contain damage, and establish your emergency operations center, which is your command and control for handling the response to a disruptive event. So the first thing you're probably going to think is, what do you mean life safety? If it's a malware attack, how does that pose a threat to someone's life or health? What you have to consider here is, what are the affected systems responsible for handling? Suppose the affected system is a system in a hospital intensive care unit that's responsible for heart rate monitors and things like that. What if the system is responsible for controlling a hazardous material containment system in, say, a biological research facility? These are cases where a compromised system may be an imminent life threat to someone, so you're going to have some sort of mitigation plan in place for systems like this, whether it's go to some sort of manual control, reassigning staff to take up the extra tasks, or in extreme circumstances, evacuating patients to another facility. This is the first and most important incident response responsibility. It's to assess, is there a life safety issue, and immediately activating those mitigation plans. Next, we have damage assessment and containment. Here, the primary questions we're going to ask are, which services have been compromised by the attack and which services have not been compromised by the attack. We'll also want to assess the risk of spreading the infection to systems that haven't been compromised yet, and the possibility of that infection getting spread to people that we work with outside the company, such as vendors, clients, strategic partners that we do business with on a regular basis. A huge part of the assessment is estimating the quantitative and qualitative costs and impacts. On the quantitative side, you're going to want to know, hey, if I have these systems down, how much is it costing me per day that they're down? And you need to be aware of issues that probably aren't going to have a fixed cost associated with them, things like reputation impact, morale impact, and such. This is also the phase where you're going to take those immediate steps to quarantine or contain the malware infection, whether that's taking certain systems off your network temporarily or telling some or all of your staff to go hands off on the IT systems until the situation is resolved, just to contain the risk of them triggering another infection. Your incident response team will also be responsible for activating your emergency operations center. That's the command and control team that's going to take charge of the response to the incident and recovery from it. They're going to need to know what happened, what the assessment is, and they're going to have some initial decisions to make. Depending on the exact situation and arrangements with outside agencies, they may need to make that initial call to local law enforcement to get a criminal investigation started. And they'll have to quickly make the decisions to activate and engage their crisis communications and recovery plan teams, which are the next phases of our incident response. In the case of a ransomware attack, one of the most damaging things that's hard to quantify is damage to your business's reputation due to the attack. How your crisis communication team and your crisis communication plan handle communications, especially with external parties like government agencies or business partners, or even more critically, news agencies. It's going to be very important to establish lines of communications with your local law enforcement's cyber crimes unit. They may need to actually take command of the situation for a short period of time before turning things back over to you. And if you want to have the option of pursuing legal agency after the situation's taken care of, you're going to want to make sure that you're transferring any kind of evidence that you collect or data you collect on the attack to them in an effective and timely fashion. Your plan for internal communications to your own employees is going to be critically important. First of all, you need to inform your employees that something happened. You're going to need to make sure that employees that need to be working on the problem in some way, shape, or form are engaged and put in touch with the correct parties. And you absolutely need to stress to your employees that only designated personnel should be talking to the press, and you need to maintain confidentiality. Only people that are trained specifically to speak to the press about what's going on should be making statements on behalf of the company. Leaking information at this stage in the game can be a huge source of reputation damage, even if what's leaked is being done honestly. You need to make sure that information getting out is put out by you in a controlled manner by people that are qualified to do so. With that in mind, you can help the situation where a member of the press or media is just really pressing your employees and pressuring them to give out information that they're not supposed to be divulging. You can arm your employees with a contact that they can use as a referral. So if somebody's really pressing them, telling them that you have to answer us, you can say, hey, here's the contact to go to get official information. It'll help your employees make the right decision, and they won't feel as pressured to reply if the media is really hounding them. As I just mentioned before, your external communications need to be handled by authorized personnel who are specifically trained to do so, and only by those authorized personnel. In most cases, this is going to be someone or a team of people from your public relations group, or possibly from your legal team as well. If there is any chance at all that a malware infection can be spread to your vendors, your clients, and your business partners, you need to reach out to them and disclose what happened to them. And they need to hear it from you, not from someone else. So again, the people authorized and trained to do so need to reach out to your third-party partners before things get out in the news. You want to make sure that you protect your reputation with these parties and remain transparent with them. If a piece of malware transfers to a client somehow and they didn't hear it from you, they're going to wonder if you really had their best interests in mind, and it may damage your business relationship with them. Communication with the press and other media outlets is going to be very critical as well. You want to make sure that you inform the press before someone else does, so that you can establish control of the narrative. You want to be the one giving the news so that you have control of what's presented. A worst case scenario is something like you have a ransomware attack and the attacker decides to go to the media themselves to brag about how they shut you down. You can keep this kind of impact under control if you've already announced to the media that, hey, we've had a cyber attack, we've got it under control, we have a plan, and this is our timeline. With that in mind, when talking to the media, it's probably a good idea to give them a schedule of updates. Say, we'll contact you again with an update in 12 hours or 24 hours or whatever your time frame is. And if you have a major development, you'll probably want to communicate that immediately, whether or not it's time for a scheduled update. The things that will save your reputation here is being honest and transparent and showing that you have control of the situation and you have a plan. Recovery plan activation is the stage where we execute the steps we need to do to recover from the ransomware attack and get back to normal operations. Much of this is going to be a technical exercise, but you still have some very important strategic and business decisions to make at this stage that are going to determine the course of how things play out. Ransomware attacks can be varied and very situational, so you're going to have to make a decision which of the major paths you're going to go down. There's generally 3 major routes you can go down, and the business decision here is going to be to choose which one or ones of them you pursue and what order you pursue them in. The 3 decisions are to pay the ransom, to use technical means to break the encryption and gain control of your systems back, and your final option is to actually do a recovery from some sort of secure archive or backups. You're really going to have to pay attention and understand the situation in order to make this decision, because it's going to be very fluid and very varied from situation to situation. Can you trust that the attacker is going to keep their word if you pay the ransom? Does your staff have confidence that they can break encryption? Do they have the skills to take on the task, and can they do it in a reasonable amount of time? Do you have a secure air-gapped archive that's protected from infection that you can use to recover in a timely manner with acceptable level of data loss? And how much is this outage costing you over time, so that you can gauge what the financial impact of each of these 3 routes is going to potentially be? Paying the ransom is actually a viable option if that ransom is less than the cost of the projected downtime and you believe the attacker will keep their word and give you the decryption keys. You can choose between breaking encryption or going for recovery, depending on how long each of those activities are estimated to take and what that cost is. Again, it's important to know that cost, and you get that cost generally from your business impact analysis report that, well, if you have a good business continuity program, you should already have one of those. And whatever path or paths you end up choosing, you're going to have a parallel effort to make sure that you're collecting forensic data, evidence, logs, etc., that your legal team or your local law enforcement teams are going to need to support a criminal investigation or legal action. Also consider, especially in cases where there's a breach of privacy data, you may have to defend against lawsuits as well, and you're going to need as much data as you can to help with those efforts. And again, I want to stress that cost versus time metric is of critical importance. So you may decide, hey, we're going to try and break the encryption and beat this thing on our own, but we're not exactly sure how long it's going to take. Knowing the costs versus time metric will tell you how long you can pursue that before you're in trouble and you need to shift gears and consider pursuing other options. Again, we didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of technical details of what to do, but rather focus on the business decisions and key things to consider from a strategic point of view. So here are some of the major points that you're going to want to think about when you're putting together your business continuity plan to respond to a ransomware attack. Don't underestimate the possible impact on your organization's reputation. An attack followed by a botched communication plan may cause more financial damage down the line and broken trust with your business partners than the attack itself will cause. It's critically important. Have control of those communications. Be aware that your employees may inadvertently disclose information to the press during a ransomware event, or in a worst case, you may have a malicious employee or bad actor inside your organization that may leak information or even possibly be complicit in the attack. Be aware of this possibility and try to keep it under control by enforcing those good communication policies. The thing that probably makes the decisions that you have to make the hardest is the fact that the attacker may or may not keep their word. You may pay them, and maybe they won't give you the encryption key. The attack might just be a front to leave other spyware or malware behind, or just a front to collect sensitive information to send to the attacker that they can use at a later date. There's a lot of potential uncertainty here, so you're going to need to try and do some digging and find out as much about your attacker as you can in a very short period of time and just make the best decision you can make. More sophisticated ransomware attackers will intentionally go after your backup copies and any redundant systems you have, as they're going to want to limit your ability to get around paying that ransom. In the technology world, solutions that specifically target this possibility are becoming popular problems to develop solutions for. If you go back and look at my last video on ransomware attacks, I talked about air-gap solutions and near air-gap solutions. That's the kind of thing that you need to look at if you want to make sure that you have a backup copy of your data that can be protected from this kind of problem. You have to consider that continued activity on uninfected systems may actually help the infection spread. You have to consider having at-risk systems stand down operations until the crisis is averted, unless you can ensure that they're not going to trigger further infections. So if your technical teams can come up with a way of isolating infected systems from the rest of your environment, that's something you definitely need to plan for and consider including in your recovery plans. When it comes to crisis communications, you need to be in control of communications. You need to be the one to inform the public and your vendors and clients and business partners rather than give the opportunity of being the messenger to someone who does not have your best interests in mind or is an outright malicious actor. Also keep in mind that ransomware can be sitting dormant in your environment for weeks or months before being activated, so you'll need the ability to go back to different points in time to earlier recovery point objectives to find an infection-free data set and be aware that recovery may result in significant data loss. So if you face a ransomware attack, you're going to have a lot of tough decisions to make and not a lot of information to use to make those decisions. So try to plan for gathering as much information as you can and making the best decision that you can with the information you have. There may not be an optimal answer to the problem, but if you stay in control of the situation and have a plan and communicate effectively, you'll come out okay on the other end. Thanks for watching today's presentation. If you found this topic interesting and you want to learn more about disaster recovery and business continuity, you can help support the channel by leaving a comment to tell me what you thought about it, clicking like on the video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you won't miss out on my next video. Your support and feedback is very important, so thank you for watching and supporting the channel, and have a great day.